Another thing, Anconius, guys, Anconius, some people would explain it with the posterior muscles of the arm, like we mentioned that previously, and some of them will consider it one of the extensor groups of the forearm, because it comes out from the lateral epicondyle, like it's a common extensor origin for the superficial muscles of the back of the forearm. So Anconius would be considered one of them. Anconius, why do I want to mention it here? Because Anconius it's a weak flex extensor of the elbow, and we talked about that previously. And now I want to add one more important function for the Anconius, which is basically it keeps the distance between the radius and ulna whenever you do pronation. So in order for the bones to keep the distance between them, well, thanks to the Anconius muscle, it's going to make sure to keep the distance between them. All right, so it keeps a abduction of the ulna during pronation function. Okay, so this is one important function about Anconius. Now let's talk about the flexors and how the flexors muscle arranged. So in the anterior compartment of the forearm, we have superficial muscles, 4, we have intermediate muscle, 1, and we have deep muscles, 3. So 4 minus 1 equals 3. The superficial muscle are 4, the intermediate is 1, and 3 deep muscles. How can I remember them? Now, if you guys look at this, put your hand on your medial epicondyle. This is the common flexor origin that will give you the muscles of the forearm. And look at your fingers, and the way you will memorize them is exactly the way they are arranged. So first muscle is the pronator teres. It comes out from the common flexor origin, and it also has another head, not only from the medial epicondyle, it also originates from the ulna itself, and then it is attached to the radius. Because remember, we said the pronators and supinators, they come out of ulna and they are attached to radius. So pronator is one of the muscles that will follow the rule, ulna to radius. Plus, remember that it's one of the flexors muscles, superficial muscles. So this one comes out of the CFO, which is the common flexor origin, which is your medial epicondyle of humerus. It has a humeral head, it has ulnar head. All right. Now, the first muscle is the pronator teres, and then you have muscle that goes to the radius. We call it flexor carpi radialis. Why do we call it flexor? Because it's flexor group. Why carpi? Because it attaches itself to the base of the metacarpal bone. Metacarpal and carpi, yes, because carpus, you guys, in Latin means rest. So anything at this region, we call it carpi. We refer to it as carpi. So even though the carpi muscles are reaching bases of metacarpals, still we're gonna call them carpi, not meta. We don't need to add so many names. It's already going to the carpus in Greek, and so we will call it carpi. So that will give us hint on where exactly that muscle is going to attach itself as insertion. Followed by palmaris longus. So it's a long muscle. Why do we call it palmaris longus? Because it has a long tendon. So we said the first one is pronator teres, ulna to radius, and it has a humeral head. And then the second one is carpi, the flexor carpi radialis. It goes to the base of metacarpal bone. Second and third, and I will tell you one rule for all the carpi muscles to help you memorize them. And then the next one is the palmaris longus. It has a long tendon, and it ends as palmar aponeurosis. It's this aponeurotic tendon that will get attached to the tendons of the digits, and it will blend to the subcutaneous tissue, because it wants to hold your hand grip and keeps your skin attached to the tendons, so that you have an efficient grip whenever you want to hold something with your hand. All right. So this is the palmaris longus, and this is the palmar aponeurosis, and how the palmar aponeurosis is important in making efficient hand grip. And then the last one is a flexor also, and it's gonna be going to the metacarpal, and that one is near to the ulna, so we call it flexor carpi ulnaris. All right. So we have pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus and flexor carpi ulnaris. If you guys look at the ulnaris, you will find it going all the way on the ulna side, and it attaches itself into the base of the fifth metacarpal bone. If you guys look at the cadaver, you have a group of muscles coming out of the medial epicondyle. So you can see one that is short. The short one that comes first and ends at the radial side is going to be your pronator teres. And then you have the next one, which has a muscle that goes all the way to the radial side. So it goes from here all the way to the radial side with a tendon that attaches to the second and third metacarpal bones, and I'm going to tell you how to memorize this. And then you will have a muscle that has a long tendon that blends with the aponeurosis, so this is what we call the palmaris longus. All right, and the last one comes here to the ulna side and it goes to the fifth metacarpal bone. It's gonna be your flexor carpi ulnaris. All right, so pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis. You can see its tendon very distal here, very lateral here, radial side, and then palmaris longus, it has a long tendon, and then flexor carpi ulnaris. Someone will tell me, what is this here? This is part of the flexor digitorum superficialis. All right, so just move and look at where the tendon is going, so that will give you a good hint about the muscles. All right, so here the radialis tendon, so retrogradely this is the flexor carpi radialis. This is a very long tendon, palmaris longus. This is the one that's near to the ulna, so this is flexor carpi ulnaris. All right, now let me tell you the carpi concept. The carpi concept, guys, is that whenever you hear the word carpi, we have flexor carpi radialis, we have flexor carpi ulnaris, right? In the extensor group, we will have extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, and we will have extensor carpi ulnaris. Whenever you hear the word carpi, remember that those bones, they are inserted into the base of metacarpals. Which metacarpals? If you are radialis, the radialis would be second and third metacarpal bones. So second, base of second and third metacarpal bones. If you are ulnaris, you will attach yourself to the base of the fifth metacarpal bone. Now, it's not always second and third. For the flexor carpi radialis, yes, second and third. For extensor carpi radialis, the longus, only second. The brevis, sometimes they say only third, sometimes they say both. All right? So flexor carpi radialis goes to the base of second and third metacarpal bones. And extensor carpi radialis, longus, second, brevis, third, or second and third. Brevis. All right? Now, the ulnaris, whether it's flexor carpi ulnaris or extensor, both of them will go to the base of the fifth metacarpal bone, but keep in mind that the anterior people will go to the palmar surface of those bases, and the posterior people will go to the dorsal surface of those bases. All right, this is only going to be the difference. All right, so by now everyone knows how to say the insertion of these bones. Now let's move to the next group. If we try to cut off the muscles that are covering the flexor digitorum superficialis, we will find that those muscles, the next group, which is also coming from, it has a humeral ulnar head, the humeral head from medial epicondyle, CFO, and it has also ulnar head, and that is having also radial head. So the flexor digitorum superficialis, it has a very broad origin, and it's a very broad muscle, and that is taking a whole layer, second layer, or intermediate layer, and it goes with tendons, and those tendons move below the flexor retinaculum to reach the, it splits itself to reach the phalanges, and it splits itself to move onto the phalanges, middle phalanges, and then it splits itself, okay, because from the splitting of the tendons you will come to know that this is flexor digitorum superficialis, and that way you will understand the difference between it and the profundus. Now, what is the innervation? The innervation is going to be by median nerve. And also here, these muscles are innervated by median nerve, except the one that holds the name ulnaris, because the ulnar nerve will move near to it, so it's impossible for the ulnar nerve to leave someone to take one of its muscles. So the flexor carpi ulnaris is innervated by ulnar nerve, and the rest of them is median. And remember, the anterior group is by median and ulnar, and the posterior group is by radial or its deep branch. Okay, so posteriorly radial, anteriorly median and ulnar. Everything anteriorly is median. If it's superficial, it's median itself. If it's deep, remember, we said that whenever we are deep, we are splitting and giving a deep branch, and we're going to call it anterior interosseous nerve. So let's reach the deep and talk about that. We said that 3 minus 1 equals 3, so we have here 3 muscles. What would be remaining to us in the anterior group? Remember, we had a pronator teres, and we didn't talk about the pronator quadratus. So the pronator quadratus would be one of them. Remember that we talked about superficialis, flexor digitorum, but we didn't mention profundus. So we have a profundus, flexor digitorum profundus. And then the last one is, remember guys, the flexor digitorum superficialis and profundus, they don't give tendon to the thumb. The thumb has its own muscles. So because I don't have a flexor, so I will make a separate muscle, and I will call it flexor pollicis longus, and that will take care of the thumb. All right, so the superficial group was the 4 fingers you're putting now on your medial epicondyle. It was pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi analis. Second group, flexor digitorum superficialis. Third group, pronator quadratus, flexor digitorum profundus, and flexor pollicis longus. Now, what is the origin and insertion? All right, it's easy. The pronator quadratus, we know that all pronators and supinator from the ulna to radius, the lower fourth of ulna to radius. Great. Now, what do you think would be the origin of the remaining 2 muscles? It's very easy. I have a muscle that goes to the medial digits, so it's gonna come out of the medial bone. So it comes out of the ulna and interosseous membrane. It comes out of ulna. And I have a muscle that goes to the distal finger. So that will come, the lateral finger, the lateral thumb. And that muscle will come out of the lateral bone. So we are fair enough here. Everyone is taking an origin from the bone that is on its side. All right. So the flexor pollicis longus will come out of radius. All right. It will come out of radius, and it will go all the way to attach itself into the distal phalanx of the thumb. And then the profundus, all of them will go to attach themselves into the distal phalanges of all fingers. Distal because it's a profundus. Okay, so profundus needs to go all the way to the end, but the superficialis, it ends earlier. Now here we've cut the superficialis. Can you guys see the cut tendons of superficialis that split itself to attach to the middle phalanges? And it split itself. Can you see the splitting? So the splitting is basically for the superficialis, but the one that goes all the way and it moves in the center, this is the profundus. So this is the profundus, flexor digitorum profundus. So this is all profundus in the ulna side, and it goes deep to the flexor retinaculum to reach the distal phalanges. And the one that has that is unipinnate in nature, looks like a feather. It's a unipinnate muscle on the radius side, and it goes all the way to the thumb. This is gonna be my flexor pollicis longus. We said that we have one here, we have one there, one from ulna, one from radius. From the ulna goes to the digits, from radius goes to the thumb, and then one from ulna to radius. Like the general rule we have, it's the pronator quadratus from the lower fourth of ulna to the lower fourth of radius. Now, what would be the innervation? The innervation, you guys, would be by the deep and the branch of the median nerve, because everything anteriorly is median nerve. Now, what is the deep branch? It's very simple and easy. It's a nerve that is very deep and in front of the the interosseous membrane. So we will call it anterior interosseous nerve. So anterior interosseous nerve will give supply to the deep structures here, except that the medial part, because this is Can you guys see that this is your flexor digitorum profundus? All right, this is flexor digitorum profundus. All right, so it has medial part and lateral part. The medial part is near to the ulna. So because it's near to the ulna and the ulnar nerve is piercing that and moving between it and the flexor carpi ulnaris, ulnar nerve will give the carpi ulnaris and the medial part of the flexor digitorum profundus, and everything else will be taken care of by the anterior interosseous nerve if it's deep. If they are superficial muscles, median nerve itself. All right, and we already talked about the ulnar nerve previously and the lumbricals. Now let's move to the extensor muscles. In the extensor muscles, we have 6 superficial muscles and 5 deep. All right, so 6 and 5. What are these muscles? They are very easy, but now I want you to just add one thing, that sometimes they consider the Anconius as one of the forearm muscles because it takes one origin from the common extensor origin, the CEO. We had CFO, and now we have the CEO, the common extensor origin, which is the lateral epicondyle. Feels like we are talking about a company with the CFO, the chief financial manager, and the CEO. Okay, so remember that the forearm muscles, the superficial muscles, are people working in companies and they have good positions there. Okay, so the flexor people were coming from the common flexor origin. All right, the medial epicondyle, and the extensors were from the common extensor origin, which is the lateral epicondyle. Now, the 6 muscles, let's exclude the Anconius, because if we consider Anconius, we will have 7 muscles, okay? Now, what are these muscles? Now, the first one we need to know is the brachioradialis, guys. Brachioradialis is one of the muscles that runs with this group, the superficial muscles of the forearm. And you guys, if you hold this part of your hand, this is your brachioradialis. So the first muscle we're going to talk about is the brachioradialis. It's the very first muscle that you can hold if you try to touch this area. And brachioradialis, guys, although it comes out from the of course from the humerus, but I mean, although it's a muscle that runs posteriorly, but it will do flexion of the elbow in mid-prone position. Why? Because it turns around. Although it's coming from the back, but it turns in front of the elbow. So imagine that you are trying to pull the bones here, it will come into flexion. Okay, so it makes sense that although brachioradialis is one of the muscles that at the back, we consider it one of the extensors, but what it basically do is it flexes the elbow in mid-prone position. All right, this is a mid-prone position. And so the first one we have is the brachioradialis. It has someone following it, and that one would be extensor carpi radialis longus. Why am I mentioning these two together? Because they are most of the time will be together, because these two guys are coming from the supracondylar ridge. Remember, guys, we had the humerus. All right, so the humerus, guys, we have a epicondyle, an epicondyle, and the lateral epicondyle is what we're talking about now, extensor origin. But we have an elevation above that, we call it supracondylar ridge. Now, from the upper 2/3 of supracondylar ridge, the brachioradialis will originate. The brachioradialis will originate. And from the lower third of supracondylar ridge, the extensor carpi radialis longus. Okay? And that's why it's longus, because it comes out from the humerus itself. And it goes all the way to the base of second metacarpal bone. Remember the radialis, carpi radialis, the general rule? We said that extensor carpi radialis go to base of metacarpal bones. The longus would go to the second, and the brevis would go to the third. If you guys look at this, you will see that the carpi radialis longus will go to the base of the second, and the carpi radialis brevis goes all the way to the base of third. All right, so we usually say the brachioradialis followed by carpi radialis longus, because both of them come out of the supracondylar ridge. So if you guys look at the picture,